If you will, let's go ahead and turn to Psalms 23 this morning. Give you a little bit of time to get there. Some of you guys can pull up on your phones. We will have it up on the screen. There it is. You guys stand with me this morning. I'm going to ask we read this together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right path, his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for that thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff comfort me. You prepare the table before me, the presence of the enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, the cup overfloweth. Mercy follow me all the days of my life. I could be seated. It's been said before, if you want to make a Christian feel guilty, ask them about their prayer life. Now, I don't know about you. It's not as much about praying as it is finding the words to say or struggling with how to pray, or sometimes even what to pray about. I find myself many times sitting down to pray and feel that I seem repetitive. And maybe you this morning feel the same way. Maybe you feel that my prayer life could be better. Or maybe I don't feel good enough to pray. Because I feel as many times as I've talked to people and asked fellow Christians, brothers and sisters, hey, how do you pray? Or what have you prayed? Or the question is, how's your prayer life? And I think that statement stands almost too real, because I feel as much as prayer as we need, being that that's our way to communicate with God and reverse. I want to encourage you this morning and show you that all these doubts that you may have, understand this, is that prayer is not only important, but it's valuable. Your prayer is communicating to God and seeing how intimate and how close you can get to Him. I tell my students quite often that it may be hard to pray, but understand that sometimes prayer is just having a conversation with God. But sometimes it's hard because we don't have that person in front of us to give us feedback or answer the questions or make a statement and go, okay, that's all right, everything's going to be fine. But as much as I want to focus on prayer, and I know we noticed Psalms 23, and the man who wrote that, sometimes I feel myself is that I can't pray like that. I couldn't begin to write a song like that. Something that's so intimate. To compare a God who is in control as a shepherd, and you notice that He compares us like we're sheep, and God being the shepherd. And I find it very ironic because sometimes I compare God to something else, and we're going to talk about that here in just a little bit. But I want to focus not just on the psalm this morning, which we're going to, but I don't want to focus much on the prayer, but I want to focus on the person behind the prayer this morning, the person behind Psalms 23. And that would be David, King David. And I'll tell you, David is one of these guys where when you first start reading about David and you first start getting into his story, he seems kind of like not the guy to really look out for. But then you see later on, he gets a lot of wins. But we also see where David has a lot of losses too. And so for some of you, you may not know King David, and some of you do, but we're going to go just briefly over some wins for David, just to kind of give you an idea of what David did and who he was. So David was actually a shepherd himself. So being the writer, you can see where he got his idea to talk about God as his shepherd. And being a shepherd, you have to basically live your life around the sheep. So those sheep are your priority 110% of the time. So that means how they were fed, how they were kept safe, everything. For example, David was a bear and lion killer. So, starting off pretty good. David was a musician, so he spent a lot of time playing and writing songs, and he's very, very talented in music. He was a great warrior. He was a giant killer. He was a king. And I'm telling you right now, if that's your resume, I would probably think very highly of you. But I want to show you that David also had some struggles. David was caught in many situations. He had losses. He wasn't very desired as a child. He became an enemy later on in life of the current king only by jealousy. People saw how David acted and how he held himself, and people started to favor him more, and he was called by God to be the future king. But the current king, Saul, didn't see it that way. He struggled with lust. He also struggled with being power hungry at a time. He was a murderer. He was an adulteress. He was also dealing with the loss of a child at a point. So if you compare that to anybody in the world, and I'm here to tell you, the thought that comes to my mind right now, especially when I was preparing this sermon, was if David were to walk in the door today and we got to know him, how long would it take for us to treat him with so much of a hypocritical mindset? Without knowing, he wrote Psalms 23. Can't imagine the punishment he would feel. So I think of it like this, and if you know me, you know one of my favorite things to do is go to the gym. I love to work out. I know I'm saying this right now, and a lot of people are like, I don't do that, Matt. I don't like being physical or active, and that's fine. But let me do a little bit of comparison for you real quick. Imagine if we held the mindset of being judgmental. And I'm here to tell you right now, whether you believe it or not, we can be judgmental. And I know not everybody's like, yep, that's me, Matt. I am super judgmental. But we know it's there. And as Christians, we hold people accountable for things that they're struggling with when we shouldn't do that at all. We should help guide them. But what if we thought of the gym like the church, or like the church like the gym? And what if we did walk in there with our mindset, we're focused, we've got our gym clothes on, and we immediately walk in the door and it's like, there's a lot of jiggliness going on in here. Way too many people out of shape in here, and this is a gym. What if we had that mindset every single time we walked into a church? Of course, but if you think about it, sometimes the gym can be beneficial. What if we treated everything like it was kind of like discipleship? What if we looked at it this way? I myself wanted to get in shape, so I start changing my diet, and I find a personal trainer, and I find someone to help me get where I need to go. And I'm struggling, and I can't seem to get there, but my personal trainer's in my corner going, hey, guess what? You can go for 15, but I believe you can go for 20, and I'm going to push you there. I'm going to show you what you may not think you're capable of, but you're capable of. Because what you've been told, what you've thought of yourself, isn't what I believe you can do. Since he's looking right at me, making a face, I'll use an example. One of my youth, he said, hey man, I want to go to the gym and work out with you. I want you to come help me figure out some things. And I said, okay, cool, we'll go work out. So we went and worked out, and I started showing him some moves, and I started showing, hey, look, make sure you're doing this and doing this, because if you do it this way, you're going to hurt yourself, and you don't want to do that. And it's all about moving the weight and controlling the weight, not just throwing the weight. You don't want to do all this. So I was like, hey, go ahead and do this movement, and I'm going to show you where you want to try to focus on that muscle. And I want to show you, look, it takes a mind focus to control what we're dealing with right here. So as we were going through, and I was like, all right, go ahead, keep going. He got to a point where he was getting really, really worn out, and he's like, I can see it in his face. He's like, I'm going to give up. And I reached down, and I told him, I said, look, go for one more. And he looked with terror in his eyes like, I can't do it. And I'm like, you can do it. Just go for one more. Keep going. One more. One more. And one more. And one more. And finally I said, hold it for just a second. And I said, slowly let go. And you can see it in his eyes like, holy cow. I could do it. I did have the ability to do it. And I immediately asked him, I said, how'd that feel? And he looks at me and goes, it was great. It was awesome. I was able to push myself. And I love that I had somebody behind me to do that. Man, what if we treated it like it was a church? I love the story of David because out of all the things that he did wrong, all the things that he struggled with, he was still called a man after God's own heart. And I want to encourage you this morning. There are some people in this room that are dealing with struggles. They're dealing with losses. They've made mistakes. And I'm going to tell you right now, as long as your heart is focused on God, and when you have people surrounding you that are willing to support you and care for you in your time of need, things will increase. It's not going to be easy. It's just like the gym. If everybody thought getting in shape was easy, everybody would be in the door the entire year, not just in January. Because just like the gym and just like dieting along with the gym, it takes a life-changing situation. It's not something that sometimes we find ourselves getting to a path and then flowing back down. Getting there and then flowing back down. But the thing and the beauty of God is he says, I love you with grace. And I think that's why why David was known after a man after God's own heart, because he focused on the things that God wanted for him. So I'm going to give you a couple things real quick. The reason I think that God really had David in his mind, and David had God in his heart, was for these things. First one I want to say is faith. David had the faith when he faced Goliath, knowing that the situation that he was about to embark in was seamlessly impossible for everyone that was around him. Not only that, he went in with just a sling and a stone, no armor. So he had faith that God was going to see the situation through when nobody else did. Understand that whole situation, Goliath was killing people very easily because of his size and his strength. Armies chose not to face him. So David, with his faith, he stepped forward and he conquered because God empowered him through that faith. David had trust. Trust in God was going to handle the situation between him and Saul. Now, believe it or not, Saul being the current king, he was not happy that people were starting to favor David over him. He sought to kill him. He trusted God in that time to carry him through that situation because he was told by God that you were going to be the next king. So, I mean, if it was me, if I've got the current king, hey, look, I want to kill you. I don't want you around. And then God's over here going, hey, you're going to be the king. I'm going to be like, God, you don't know what you're talking about. This guy's trying to kill me. I don't want to step near that position. David had love for Saul. Even in the midst of all of that anger, he still had love for Saul. He respected him. It's even been said that he had agape love. He was willing to do whatever it takes for Saul. I mean, he was in a position at one point where he could have killed Saul easily, and he chose not to. I'm going to give you these two right here, kind of as one, but humility and integrity. You see, David did something that almost kind of catches you out of left field. Is, you know, he ends up sleeping with a woman, and then he has her husband killed. And because of that, it kind of left a downward spiral of some situations, and then the next thing that he did, which was kind of crazy later on, is he decides, because he has an army, they need food. He doesn't have food. He goes to these priests and he basically says, hey, look, you know, here's the situation. I'm going to convince you that, you know, I need food, but I'm going to tell a lie doing this so that I can get what I need. And then because of what he did, he basically got those priests killed. But having humility and integrity, he still owned up to the situation. David sought out forgiveness. When he knew he did wrong and he knew there was no turning back, he sought forgiveness. Now, for some of us, that's a struggle. Let's just be honest. I don't know many people when they do something wrong and it's been intentional who are willing to go up and say, hey, guess what? I did it and that's all my fault. It takes a huge amount of integrity to step up sometimes. And I love this last one because it just makes everything kind of come full circle. He had a worshipful heart. After all the things that he did wrong, and even the things that he lost, like a child, he still worshiped God. He was willing to get himself out of the way. David would be considered, as what us Clemson fans like to say, he was all in. He gave it all when he had the opportunity to. He struggled, but he still knew God was the one that was in control. And that's honestly the beauty that I see in Psalms 23, because if you look at David and you look at his heart, you can see how Psalms 23 kind of makes sense. And it's been said that he wrote Psalms 23 after all of those things. So it was a later writing. And I think that makes sense because for someone to write something as inspiring as Psalms 23, and I love it. It's such a beautiful psalm because it connects. It shows us how God is connected to us in a way that I feel some people just need to hear sometimes. But we're going to go to Psalms 23, and I'm going to end with this. And I want to show you something that was shown to me, and I want to pass it on to you guys for encouragement. But as we look at Psalms 23, and I've got a little figure I want to show you guys. That's David, by the way. Everybody meet David. So David wrote Psalms, and as he wrote it, he said some things that I thought, man, this has got to be why he still worshiped and he still had a heart for God. So if you look at Psalms 23, you notice that he leads us in paths of righteousness. So he's always in front of us. On my side, his rod and his staff comfort me. And his rod is a symbol of strength and protection. The staff is a representation of his love and his kindness. It also shows us that he is our shepherd. Over the top of me, he's anointing me with oil, which is his joy. Behind me is his goodness and mercy, and it's following me all the days of my life. So church, this morning, I want to encourage you, get up. God is around us at all times. And we have the Spirit. That right there, I believe, is why David walked the way he did. Is because he knew that no matter if it was in front of him, behind him, beside him, or over him, God had him in his protection. He used it and he stayed positive with it. So I'm going to go ahead and invite the band up. And I want to encourage you guys this morning that you may be in a situation where you're dealing some things and you might be struggling at this moment. But I want to show you what God showed me is that David struggled and we struggled, but God is around us at all times.